the storm that blows in from Washington. We can, however, chart a new course by building Canada strong at home and diversifying our trading relationships abroad. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous et le partenaire par excellence à l'étranger. For over a year, Canada has worked intensively and in good faith with the United States to negotiate a new comprehensive trade deal. We've been pragmatic, patient, and persistent. We pursued every opportunity to reach an agreement that protects Canadian workers and their families, that strengthens our economy, and that respects Canadian sovereignty. We've been under no illusions. We recognized from the start that America has changed. Early last year in this room, I observed that the decades-long process of steadily increasing integration between our economies was over. Our government understood before many that America would transform all of its commercial relationships, that it would put a series of tariffs on its closest allies and use economic integration as a weapon. We recognize that sometimes its signature was written in pencil. We worked in that context to try to strike a fair deal on which Canadian businesses and workers could rely. Our goal has always been to get the best deal for Canadians, never a deal at any price or on any time frame. Last month, when the United States announced another round of unjustified tariffs, I gave our negotiating team a new mandate to seek a fair deal negotiated in good faith. Because I believe that people on the ground, on both sides of our border, want this relationship to work. The bonds between Canadians and Americans are long, and they remain strong. A mutually beneficial trade agreement is possible, one that respects our sovereignty, one that builds on our complementary strengths, one that lowers costs for families on both sides of the border, one that creates good jobs for our workers. Canada has always worked towards these goals, even while America's attention and dedication to them have wavered. We've consistently proposed long-term partnerships, while America has often pursued short-term transactions. The gap between partnership and competitor, unfortunately, has remained too wide in recent days. So last evening, I instructed our negotiators to return to Ottawa. We cannot accept what they've offered, and we will not give what they've asked. Over the past year, the U.S. has imposed a series of tariffs that violate its commitment under our agreement with them in Mexico, so-called CUSMA. The United States has continually changed the rationale for these actions, from fentanyl to taxes on U.S. tech giants, to certification of U.S. aircraft, to the sharing of tolls of a bridge that Canada built and paid for, to our dairy policy, to provincial decisions not to sell American alcohol during the trade war, to a television advertisement that quoted Ronald Reagan, to smoke from wildfires while they threatened our communities. Another prominent justification for U.S. tariffs has been their claim that since the United States runs, quote, a trade deficit with Canada, we were ripping them off. Also a quote. But the U.S.'s narrow merchandise trade deficit only exists because the U.S. buys so much of its energy from Canada. Canada fuels American growth, supplying 99% of their natural gas imports, 85% of their electricity imports, 60% of their crude oil imports. I don't think they want us to stop sending any of that energy. And if you look more broadly at the comprehensive U.S.-Canada trade balance, which includes the many services from finance to entertainment that we buy from the United States, that shows a persistent American trade surplus. Most fundamentally, trade is about building mutual strength, creating a relationship that benefits both countries. For example, Canada is the largest customer for U.S. cars. In fact, we buy more American-built cars and trucks than the United Kingdom, Japan, and China combined. It's the same for American steel products. Canada is also the largest customer for 26 U.S. states and a top 3 customer for 45 U.S. states. Last year, Americans sold almost $600 billion in goods and services to Canadians. That's more than $1.6 billion every single day. On the other hand, Canadian exports to the United States lower costs for American families. In contrast, tariffs are taxes. Taxes which are ultimately paid by U.S. consumers. While the United States has imposed a seemingly endless stream of tariffs and threatened more, Canada has, by contrast, taken several steps in good faith to try to find compromise and secure a comprehensive deal in the best interests of both Canadians and Americans. Nos négociateurs ont cherché à non seulement réduire les droits de douane, mais aussi à rétablir un degré de certitude et de stabilité grâce à un nouvel accord global sur lequel les entreprises et les travailleurs canadiens peuvent compter. Ce qui m'amène aux dernières négociations. Last month, the U.S. announced that effective August 19, it would impose 50% tariffs on a series of industries ranging from hockey equipment to clothing, cement, and beer. The only advantage of this latest threat was that it was a catalyst for more intensive negotiations. Our objectives in these latest talks have been to preserve tariff-free access to the U.S. for the vast majority of Canadian businesses. Secondly, to provide greater stability to our trade relationship. Thirdly, to significantly reduce U.S. tariffs on our key strategic industries so that Canadian businesses in these sectors would have the best access of any in the world. Fourth, protect our small and medium-sized businesses, including by removing the imminent threat of those new tariffs. And fifth, fundamentally, maintain Canada's flexibility, independence, and sovereignty so we can keep building the country Canadians want. Canada has made offers to secure a fair, comprehensive deal that would be in the best interests of Canadians. We were willing to drop our remaining retaliatory tariffs on strategic sectors, particularly steel, aluminum, and autos, if the United States substantially lowered theirs to levels that made it economic for Canadian companies to export to the United States. In exchange for a fair deal, we would encourage our provinces to return U.S. alcohol to the shelves. And we would take administrative measures to protect supply management without changing the system itself, the U.S. quotas, or the tariffs that would apply. There were some things we wouldn't do. We were not prepared to compromise Canada's sovereignty or to undermine our key industries. Nous n'étions pas prêts à faire de compromis sur notre souveraineté, la protection de la langue française et notre culture. Pour nos collègues américains, soyons clairs, pour mon gouvernement et pour le Canada, ces questions n'ont jamais été sur la table, même si les États-Unis ont essayé jusqu'à la dernière minute. Now, in recent weeks, there had been important progress made towards a possible agreement, an agreement that would have reinforced Canada's position as having the best deal in the world with the United States, including by securing the best terms for each of our most important strategic sectors and by providing greater certainty about our future trading relationship. And while we believed earlier this week that we were moving towards a mutually beneficial agreement, in recent days the United States proposed new terms that were uneconomic, unfair, and undermined the net benefits for Canada and called into question the reliability of any deal. In short, they asked too much and they offered too little. More fundamentally, the cumulative effect of U.S. demands revealed the limits of their commitment to a true economic partnership. As I said earlier, as a result, last evening I suspended trade negotiations with the United States and directed our negotiators to return to Ottawa. I want to thank Minister LeBlanc and our chief negotiator, Janice Charette, their team. They've worked hard, in good faith, right up to the last minute to defend the interests of Canadians. Now, Canada will match Washington's new tariffs dollar for dollar in order to protect Canadian workers, farmers, families, and businesses. Our response will be concentrated in sectors such as steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. We'll also include products that are currently subject to unjustified Section 232 and 338 tariffs. This is a focused response to protect and defend our industries and allow them to compete with U.S. products in the Canadian market. In the coming days, we'll release details of these new tariff measures which will come into force the Tuesday after Labor Day. Let me be clear. We take this step reluctantly. Reluctantly because we recognize that some of these measures will raise costs and reduce choice for Canadians. Reluctantly because we recognize that some U.S. companies and some U.S. states are innocent bystanders in a dispute that they did not want. Reluctantly because this trade dispute is preventing Canada and America from doing so much good that we could do together. But at the same time, we take this step confident that it is in the best interest of Canada, and that by rejecting a bad deal, by standing up for Canada, by focusing on what we can control, we will build Canada strong for all. Building at home and diversifying trade abroad is not our plan B. It has been our plan A from the start. Canada will continue to pursue this path to build Canada strong because it's right and because it's working. We're moving rapidly to build major infrastructure. We've already referred 27 nation-building initiatives to the new Major Projects Office, new ports, mines, energy corridors from every region of the country that now represent $500 billion in new private investment. Projects that will help Canada build bigger, move faster, and trade more with the world. Grâce à Maison Canada, nous accélérons la construction de logements abordables. En quelques mois à peine, cette nouvelle agence s'est engagée à construire près de 17 000 logements dans le cadre de 17 partenariats. Nous bâtissons les infrastructures locales sur lesquelles les Canadiens et les Canadiennes comptent au quotidien grâce au nouveau fonds pour bâtir des collectivités fortes qui représente un investissement de 51 milliards de dollars. Plus de 100 projets ont déjà été annoncés partout au pays, entre autres de nouveaux hôpitaux, de nouveaux centres communautaires et de nouvelles lignes de transport en commun. Dans le cadre d'entente avec le Yukon, les territoires du Nord-Ouest, le Nunavut, l'Ontario et le Québec. Nous allons aussi doubler la capacité de notre réseau électrique d'ici 2050 afin que les Canadiennes et les Canadiens aient accès à une énergie abordable et durable pour les générations à venir. Parce que maîtriser notre énergie, c'est maîtriser notre destin. Just last Monday in St. John's, the governments of Canada, Quebec, Newfoundland, and Labrador launched the single largest investment in Canada's history to build the largest clean energy project in North America ever. Une deuxième Bay James. It will produce enough clean electricity to power every single vehicle in Canada. We're building our economy while taking charge of our security by investing $500 billion into our defense expanding our shipyards, growing our aerospace industry, increasing our cyber capabilities. And we're realizing Canada's full potential as an energy superpower in nuclear, LNG, renewables, and low-carbon oil and gas. These are the initiatives that are the future of our country. Canada is now the best connected economy in the world. Over the last year, we have signed more than 20 trade and security deals across 5 continents. We completed our most recent deal with the United Arab Emirates in a record 47 days. Canadian businesses now enjoy tariff-free access to 1.5 billion consumers. Over the next 6 months, we'll double that number through new trade deals from ASEAN to India. Cet automne, nous allons entamer les discussions avec l'Union européenne, la deuxième économie en importance dans le monde, pour approfondir et renforcer notre partenariat en matière de sécurité et d'économie. Canada is building such unparalleled market access because we're trusted, because we're reliable, and because we have what the world wants. That's why the world is coming to our door. In just 3 weeks, we'll host the first Canadian Investment Summit in Toronto. The summit is attracting the world's largest investors who collectively manage over $100 trillion in assets. When they get here, they'll find a Canadian economy that has never been more connected or more ambitious. Nous réduisons les impôts, nous éliminons les obstacles et nous accélérons la transformation de notre économie. Nous avons ramené le taux d'imposition sur les investissements des entreprises à seulement 13%, soit 4,5 points de pourcentage de moins qu'aux États-Unis et environ la moitié de la moyenne du G7. Nous accélérons les processus d'approbation et nous les rendons plus prévisibles, tout en investissant avec le secteur privé. Nous bâtissons une économie canadienne unifiée. Au cours de la dernière année, nous avons éliminé tous les obstacles fédéraux au commerce intérieur. Nous avons assoupli les conditions pour que les travailleurs canadiens puissent mettre leurs compétences à profit partout au pays. Nous travaillons aussi avec les provinces et les territoires pour éliminer les obstacles qui ont divisé notre économie pendant des générations. Nous prenons des mesures pour que les Canadiens et les Canadiennes puissent acheter canadien, embaucher les travailleurs canadiens et bâtir avec des matériaux canadiens plus facilement. This fall, in Budget 2026, we will go further to make Canada even more competitive and attractive for businesses and strategic investors to build, invest, and grow. The new U.S. tariffs are designed to hurt us and divide us. They're a miscalculation. They're a miscalculation because Canadians will always take care of each other. We know we're stronger together. In the last year and a half, Canadians have met this moment with resolve, with purpose, with strength. In many ways, vacationing in national parks, buying Canadian products, choosing Canadian, small acts of solidarity, repeated millions of times that make a statement. We're masters of our destiny. This government is matching that spirit with $25 billion to protect Canadian workers and businesses hurt by American tariffs. We're helping small and medium-sized businesses respond by investing in equipment, in productivity, and supply chain resilience. And we're financing large companies to keep large employers operating and to retain their workers. We're helping those hardest-hit industries retool and pivot to those new international markets. And we are being our own best customer. We have the right plan to build Canada strong. We're on track, and it's working. At the same time, we recognize that some of the biggest payoffs of this plan, of this transformation, will take time. And that's why we're also focused on giving Canadians a boost today and a bridge to that better tomorrow. So we've cut taxes on incomes, on housing, and on gas. We've introduced the Canada Groceries and Essential Benefits, up to $1,890 per family, helping 12 million Canadians get ahead. We're stronger now than when the United States started this trade war. More unified, more determined, more ambitious. With the strongest fiscal position in the G7 and a resilient economy, Canada has all the resources we need to pivot and to prosper. Growth is accelerating. We're projected to have the second fastest rate in the G7 this year and next. We are creating jobs in this economy at 4 times the rate of the United States. Our non-U.S. exports are up sharply. They're on track to double over the next decade. Foreign direct investment in Canada is at its highest level in 2 decades. It's running at twice the rate of our nearest G7 competitor. Canada. Canada now ranks as the most attractive country in the world for infrastructure investment. Last spring, I warned that America is trying to break us so they can own us. And I promise that that will never, ever happen. We are keeping that promise. Canada is becoming stronger and less dependent on America. We are already giving ourselves more than they can take away. And we are just getting started. As we observed earlier this week in St. John's, Canadians don't submit to the weather. We thrive in it. We don't wait to see which way the wind's blowing or surrender ourselves to the waves to be storm-tossed by events. We set our own course. We make our own weather. Au Canada, nous sommes maîtres chez nous de l'océan à l'autre. Building Canada strong for all. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Maintenant, nous allons passer aux questions. Questions. First question, Mackenzie.
Hello, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Gray with Global News. I'm hoping you can tell us what the specific last-minute changes that the Americans proposed that made a deal untenable.
Thank you for the question. Look, I would say 2 things. One is there are some specifics, and I'll give you some examples, but it was also a cumulative aspect, as I mentioned in my remarks, about the willingness dans l'ensemble in total to enter into a true economic partnership. But in terms of specifics, I'll give you 3, and I know there's other questions. First, with respect to the auto industry, both in terms of the level of the tariffs, the treatment of Canadian content, so Canadian parts, Canadian steel, Canadian content in vehicles, the scope of the tariffs. The Americans wanted to limit it to autos only, not include medium and heavy autos and light trucks, to be more specific, not include medium and heavy-duty trucks, which is a big change, obviously. And with respect to Ford's new plant, for example, in Oakville, which is F-350s, 450s, 550s, they would have been excluded. GM Silverado, same thing, would have been excluded from that. No rationale, just for exclusion. So effectively moving into a series of terms that would made the production more uneconomic over time. Okay, so that's a change. That restriction, that clarification, that precision was a change. The U.S. introduced at the last hours, efforts to restrict our ability to have other trade deals. You heard me say a moment ago what we've accomplished in the last year, 20 new deals, economic and security partnerships. The prospect of doubling our market access because we believe in free trade. We're the partner of choice in many respects for countries around the world, and the Americans wanted to restrict that. They had language that they wanted to restrict that. Unacceptable. And I'll give you a third, et peut-être on peut discuter plus en français. Continual efforts, always resisted, as I said in my remarks, and always will be resisted, efforts to restrict our protections of our language, our culture, and in effect, our sovereignty. So elements coming in, ramping up, any of them individually, but collectively put us in a position where what had been on a trajectory, absent those elements, for a fair deal, a good deal for Canadians, not perfect, but a good deal, a deal we would not accept.
Follow-up. Question suivie.
Was Howard Lutnick's involvement in the last days an impediment to getting a deal?
It's a question for the U.S. administration. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the decisions of the Canadian government. We take it as a cabinet, but I certainly bear those responsibilities, and so the head of the U.S. administration, the president, bears the responsibility for the decisions they take. But I will say this, which is that the Canadian team, unified, the individuals you see here, their team members, our ambassador in Washington, my chief of staff, unified, talking together, the clerk of the Privy Council, everyone in the loop, everyone knows what our objectives are, collective decision making. As I say, ultimately, I and the cabinet bear responsibility for those decisions, but unity. You cannot say that about the United States administration. And as a consequence, last point, and I'll go to your colleagues, because I think this is important. In these last few days, we were drilling down on specific issues that might have been papered over, the differences in the administration, if there were indeed differences. Ultimately, there's a decision maker at the top. And in drilling down on those, a number of those issues that I just referenced became very clear, and there was not a deal that we would sign. Thank you.
Next question. Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Andréa
Bonjour.
Blazer, Radio-Canada. Vous parlez de compromis sur notre souveraineté, la langue française, la culture, les industries clés. Quelles concessions précises vous n'étiez pas prêt à faire là-dessus?
Par exemple, il y a des suggestions de changer la découvrabilité, en effet, ça c'est le mot, oui, les découvrabilités en ligne de médias français, par exemple, culture canadienne. C'est une des exemples. Les subventions, le soutien pour notre culture, notre culture et la langue française, et même les renseignements qui sont sur les produits canadiens. Alors, il y en a plusieurs exemples, et jamais acceptable, inacceptable au début, à la fin. Mais les Américains essaient, et on dit non. Et c'est simple. Au fond, c'est simple. Jamais sur la table pour le Canada, mon gouvernement, et les Canadiens.
Question suivie. Follow-up.
Qu'est-ce que cette nouvelle escalade dans la relation commerciale avec les États-Unis signifie pour la révision de la COME?
C'est pas de bonnes nouvelles, évidemment. Mais maintenant, c'est plus clair le bout de ligne des Américains dans quelques secteurs et les limites que leurs intérêts dans l'intégration canado-américaine. On n'a plus de perspective à cause de ces négociations.
Prochaine question. Next question. CP.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
Morning.
David Baxter with the Canadian Press. There's a lot of people watching this right now who are rightfully worried about losing their jobs, losing their businesses in this trade war.
Yep.
What's your message to those people who are worried about becoming collateral damage?
Well, yeah, thank you, David. A couple of things. First, the people in these industries, particularly the industries that are being hit today by these 50% tariffs, many of them are small, medium-sized businesses. They're in a wide range of industries, spread across the country, concentrated Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, by and large. That's not exclusive, but it's that. And they have very much been top of mind. Top of mind, it's one of the reasons why we've worked so hard and stretched so far to try to get a deal. Now, but not a deal at any price, not a deal on any timetable. So a couple messages for those people. The first is we're going to hit back. Okay, we're going to hit back, and we are going to provide tariff protection where we can, where it's relevant for some of those industries. steel steel products and others is in some cases an example of that. We're going to provide full tariff protection there to prevent American businesses coming in and taking business. So that provides some. But more fundamentally, we will provide support, and we will do whatever it takes to support these businesses. We'll be releasing details of this early next week alongside our tariff actions to support these businesses. And we will support these businesses for as long as it takes. In other words, beyond the life of this U.S. administration. Okay, so there's various mechanisms that we've worked up. We'll give all the details in a few days, but think of working through our regional development agencies, also working through the Business Development Bank of Canada, and those will be the focal points for a limited number of easy-to-use but very effective programs that are going to help these businesses work through this period, pivot as necessary, because part of what we're seeing is what the potential future limits are to the American market.
Follow-up. Next question suivie.
And in the last couple of days, we heard some pushback from some of the premiers, such as Wab Kinew. Susan Holt said she was reluctant to put liquor back on the shelves. Quebec's Christine Frechette was saying she hadn't made up her mind on what Quebec's response was going to be yet. And Doug Ford was uncharacteristically silent, but he did send you a letter outlining his red lines last Monday. Just did any pushback from the premiers play a factor in the decision to end talks with the U.S.?
Thanks for the question. First, let me say a couple of things. I mean, the short answer is no. So just to give you that perspective. But, and this is an important but, the dialogue with the premiers in the last few days, over the course of the last 18 months, and the partnership that we've established with the premiers is crucial, fundamentally important. The essence of our first minister's discussion 2 days ago, we're going to have another one this afternoon, but the essence of our First Minister's discussion 2 days ago was that it's our judgment, as we told Canadians, that we were on a path to a potential deal that would give Canada not just the best deal overall, but the best deal in all of our strategic sectors, that the price for that deal, in our judgment, was worth paying. We still had to come back to the premiers with the exact specifics, so it's entirely reasonable for Premier Frechette or a premier to say, well, I want to see everything before I make that determination. But that our judgment was going to be that it's going to be worth to take steps, a couple of steps that provinces needed to do in order to get the overall deal. I'll go back to Mr. Baxter's question, not least because of the potential impact that we will now be fighting against on these small and medium-sized businesses here. Okay, so that was the discussion. I would, as chair of that meeting, there was a consensus that that's what we would do, subject to finishing the negotiation. Now, they didn't have to make that determination Wednesday, I guess it was, when we spoke, because we hadn't finalized all the terms of the deal. We were still negotiating the deal. And as it turns out, as I've just described, that the Americans changed a number of those terms, introduced new elements, made it uneconomic, and so we're not asking the premiers to do anything today except work together to support our businesses and build the country strong. And I'll underscore that last point, which, and I said this on Monday in St. John's, for the future of the country, the Churchill Agreement, Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador, supported by the federal government, that agreement and those initiatives are the most important initiatives for the future of our country. As important as trade is with the U.S. and as dramatic as the issues are and the response that we have to give in certain industries, what we're doing ourselves, premiers, the federal government, truly Canadians, is far, far more important. It dominates. Thank you.
Next question. Prochaine question.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Mike Blanchfield, Politico Canada. You've outlined a few things that the Americans asked for that were unacceptable to Canada. Did they ask about critical minerals, given that their importance, their requirement for it, and how did that play out in what happened at the last?
Well, thank you for the question. Look, the critical minerals, other aspects of energy, but let's focus in on your question, critical minerals. There is a real opportunity for cooperation between Canada and the United States in critical minerals. Just as there is cooperation between Canada and other G7 countries, like-minded countries, on critical minerals. We're demonstrating that cooperation right now. Over the course of the last 12 months, we've signed 50 deals, or it's on the order of $50 billion worth of transactions in critical minerals, stockpiling, other forms. And having the U.S. as part of that process and merging some of the processes that the U.S. have, they have a tariff initiative that they've worked on. We have the G7 action plan, which we launched in Kananaskis. Bringing those together makes sense, good opportunity, kind of thing you do as part of a trade deal. One of the reasons to do a trade deal with Canada. So yes, makes sense. Now, in the context of the U.S. putting 50% tariffs on a bunch of our business, trying to influence our cultural support and language protections, not agreeing to sensible economic terms for our core industry in autos, we've got a lot of demand for critical minerals, so there's less opportunity to cooperate with the United States. That is something that is a missed opportunity as a consequence of what's happened, but we didn't cause it to happen.
Did they ask for exclusive access to our critical minerals?
We would never give exclusive access.
And did Canada do anything at the last minute that could have triggered this? Did you make any asks or offers?
No, no. There's a short answer. From our perspective, we clarified what was on offer, and we're continually disappointed by the answers.
Next question. Prochaine question.
Good morning, Greg Quinn,
Greg.
Market News. Your midnight statement mentioned part of the breakdown was the reliability of any deal. What do you say to other global business and what do you say to other business and government leaders around the world who can wonder if the U.S. can be trusted from here? If Donald Trump can't execute the art of the deal with friendly Canada, who can he do business with?
Yeah, I mean, if you execute a deal, you have to stand by that deal. And Canada stands by our agreements. We've stood by the term. I mean, we're only responding in the context of a series of unjustified tariffs that have been put in place, unjustified under the. We have a deal with the Americans. I mean, that's the thing. We have a deal with the Americans. It's called CUSMA. We have side letters that clarify behavior in steel, in aluminum, in autos. All of those are being violated day in, day out. They act as if, we have a deal. Okay, what message does that send? On the other side of the ledger, you have a country, Canada, that has a series of trade deals around the world that's expanding rapidly, that will continue to expand because we're trusted, because we're reliable, because we have things like critical minerals, many other aspects that the world wants. And so we're going to continue to pursue that. And one thing that we certainly were not going to accept was any restriction on our ability to execute those deals.
Follow-up.
Secondly, was part of your calculation around declining U.S. bargaining power? I'm thinking of President Trump's polling numbers versus yours. I'm thinking of already elevated inflation that American consumers are facing, and also, recent instability in the U.S. bond market.
Well, let me say a couple things. No, in terms of what we're focused on, as you know, is building Canada strong. It's putting Canada in a better position for Canadians, for all Canadians. Now, it happens to be the case that we are stronger and we're in a better position than we were 18 months ago, because we've recognized right from the start that we needed to focus on building at home, we needed to diversify abroad. Both of those have longer payoffs, but we're already starting to see some of the benefits of that. We recognized, and credit to the Minister of Finance, we recognized right from the start that we need to continue to maintain the strongest fiscal position in the G7, so that our borrowing, and we will borrow, but borrowing for investment, not for operating expenses, and that shift in borrowing there. And let me make this point, because the last part of your question, you know this well, that we are entering a phase where fiscal strength, discipline, focus is going to be very important. It's going to be scrutinized. I mean, it doesn't, I will say to Canadians at home, like as someone who's been in and around financial markets for a long period of time, what I'm about to say doesn't make sense, but it's the way the world works, is that markets sometimes ignore these fundamentals, and then all of a sudden they focus on them. And when they focus on them, if you don't have your house in order, it's too late. We have our house in order, and we're getting stronger. So.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Parry with CBC. Can you talk more about what the United States was demanding Canada do with its other trading partners? Were they asking us to impose tariffs on other countries in conjunction with them?
Tom, there were elements of that, and in certain sectors. And to be clear, there were elements where we would see the merit of that as part of a comprehensive deal that made sense for Canada. So if you have an integrated auto market and you want to have an integrated steel market, for example, related aluminum market, then and you have concerns, as we do, as the Americans do, about non-market economies, about transshipment of steel, for an example, through third countries, etc., then it makes sense to align, and I would say that, again, within a comprehensive deal, we'd be prepared to do that. But that's us deciding to do something that is in our joint interests, as opposed to being told to do something or being restricted from doing something else. Now, the second point is there are a series of steel and aluminum related. By the way, if you do that, though, you should have an integrated market. In other words, the tariff level that you apply from Canada into the United States, because America wants to tariff everybody on everything, but the tariff level you apply should be clearly the lowest. It shouldn't be the same as other people. It should clearly be the lowest because you have this added market protection. That's part of the negotiation. We weren't satisfied. Ultimately, we're on steel, aluminum, and related products, so-called derivative products. Think HVAC systems, nuts and bolts, anything that's Bombardier products, Bombardier recreational products. There wasn't enough movement. Then there's a separate issue, and I'll just stop with a sentence here, which was language which suggested restrictions in terms of our ability to execute trade deals, which would always be unacceptable to this government.
Follow-up.
What do you think their goal was there? What were they trying to do? And if I could just, as a second part, what were they asking on culture?
You can ask the first, not double follow-up. Since you asked, could you ask? I'm going to say no, you can't ask 3 questions. Look, sorry, now I've forgotten the first part of your question.
What was it in trying to get us gain more control over our trade policy?
Oh, why are they trying to do that? It's a power play. It's a power play, and becomes a question of sovereignty. Look, let's take a big step back. Big step back, and this is what is unfortunate about the situation we're in. We're here for the right reason, but it's unfortunate. Canada and America and our G7 partners, we think about a lot of issues the same way. We're concerned about excess capacity in non-market economies. We care deeply about forced labor, child labor. We want it, and I'll take that second example where absolutely, do we want to cooperate? Do we want to share information? We want to align our approaches and our implementation of those approaches, and was that potentially part of this deal? Absolutely. There's a host of other things where absolutely we want to work together, but when it moves into restrictions and using Canada effectively as more leverage for America, clearly Canadians wouldn't accept that. We're a proud, independent country. We've got the right values. We'll make our decisions about who we want to trade with and how, and including on how we work with the United States and other partners. Thank you.
Well,
Il y a un seul follow-up.
we'll have time for one last question.
Oui.
Dernière question, Chris.
Oui.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Chris Bernardi from the National Post. The government to date seems, at least publicly, to have been very reluctant to wield critical minerals and energy as a weapon as part of this trade war. Is that going to change now? Are those on the table?
We have a range of other options to protect our industry. First and foremost, what are we looking to do with our counter tariffs? it's to protect industries that are disadvantaged by the American trade action. So we start with that. And then we think about matching in ways that have the least negative impact on Canadians. We don't like doing these, but in this environment, it makes sense. One of the things that's happening, I'm going to answer your question this way. One of the things that has happened over the course of the last 12, 18 months is that we have considerably ramped up development of critical minerals. Without a doubt, I can't put a precise number on it, but much less of that development has been related to the United States than it would have been if we were not having these trade issues. It is clear to Canadians the value of diversifying our partnerships. And it's clear to Canadians that, I'll say something, it's clear to Canadians that a pipeline to Asia that exports oil to Asia, or an LNG facility that exports LNG to Asia, is more valuable than just the dollar value because it helps diversify our economy, our partnerships. It makes us less dependent on the United States, less. I mean, I'll just state the obvious there. So I'm putting that in. I'm taking your question transparently and turning it to the positive of how we act to build out this, as opposed to pulling relationships that already exist, and restraining them. But we'll see.
Last follow-up, dernière question.
Probably double barrel it because it's the last one. But first, do you plan on? I know.
I can't now. You're
squeezing one out of the mouth.
Tom tried that. It's,
do you plan on reviving certain measures eliminated as what previous concessions, the digital services tax, the U.S. streaming payments for CanCon, for example, those measures? And why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war, trade war? The tone.
Because we were attacked. Like you're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked. U.S. put 50%. We waited until the United States decided to actually implement these so-called 338 tariffs. That's fine. We've got the reserves, we've got the resilience, we've got the plan, we've got the focus. We will respond. We're going to focus on what we can control. We're going to build. In terms of, let me say this, in terms of measures and tax and others, we are constantly looking at our tax system, how we can make it as fair as possible, shift the burden to those who are most able to pay, and in a way that incentivizes investment and entrepreneurship. Right? We are, all elements of the following: build Canada strong. It's not just like it is the plan, and so we want builders to put money to work in new businesses, in big infrastructure. We want them to put to work in Canada, and that makes it strong in ways for all. Il faut avoir une question en français si je peux. Oui.
En français, si je peux vous demander de répéter, est-ce que nous sommes maintenant en guerre commerciale totale?
Ce qui est évident, il y a une nouvelle attaque des Américains sur le Canada. Alors, il y a une attaque, on attaque dans une guerre. C'est pas bonne chose de tout. Ce n'est pas notre choix. Nous étions là. Nous étions prêts d'avoir un accord global, équitable pour les deux pays. Nous étions prêts d'avoir. Il semblait que nous soyons prêts d'avoir un accord global et équitable avec les Américains. Mais ils ont changé, y compris les menaces contre la langue française et la culture québécoise, la culture canadienne. C'est pas acceptable, jamais acceptable. À cause de ça, c'est la fin de cette étape des négociations.
Mais aujourd'hui, où va nous mener cette escalade? Boris, pour devoir, où va nous mener cette escalade de tarifs d'une part, tarifs de l'autre part, crise économique? Voilà une réplique du côté américain qui va nous amener à des difficultés économiques au Canada. Vous êtes prêts à ça?
Oui, le Canada oui, nous sommes prêts. On va faire tout ce qu'il faut pour protéger nos travailleurs, nos entreprises. Nous avons la résilience, nous avons une grande marge de manœuvre budgétaire, nous avons des partenaires à travers le monde. On va augmenter nos partenariats à travers le monde avec l'Inde, l'ASEAN, tous les autres, beaucoup d'autres pays. Oui, le Canada est fort et le Canada est prêt. Le Canada est uni et au travail. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you. This was sent out to our press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à notre conférence de presse. Merci.